The storm deepened through the night,
Look,
the wind
it's
pounding the
happening again.
cabin walls like
But it's
fists
different
demanding
tonight.
entry. Each gust rattled the shutters and forced smoke to waver inside the stove's throat, but the fire held, stubborn as the people gathered around it. May and Samuel finished their meal in steady silence, the kind that settled into the corners of the room like an old companion. When the bowls were empty, May rose to wash them, but Samuel stopped her with a small shake of his head. "You cooked," he said. "I'll handle this." She hesitated, her hands hovering over the dishes as if unsure whether refusing or accepting help would lead to trouble. Then she stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself as she watched him carry the bowls to the wash basin. The storm outside howled, but inside, the only sounds were the gentle scrape of metal against wood and the soft swish of water. May moved toward the fire, lowering herself onto the small rug Samuel kept near the stove, her hands extended toward the heat. Her fingers were still red from the frost, but the tremor in them had softened. She looked into the flames like one might study a map searching for direction, trying to decode the shape of her future. Behind her, Samuel finished washing and set the bowls upside down to dry. He watched her from the kitchen area for a moment, his expression unreadable. The firelight warmed the room, but the distance between their pasts and whatever might come remained vast and shadowed. He walked toward her, the floorboards creaking under his boots. She did not flinch this time. Not fully. Only a small tightening of her shoulders gave her away. She was still learning what safety looked like. "You should rest," Samuel said. "Storm ain't letting up till morning." She nodded but didn't move from the fire. "I will," she murmured. "I will try." He didn't push her. He understood that rest was more than lying down, rest was surrender, and surrender had nearly killed her before. Instead, he moved to the small shelf by the back wall and pulled down an extra quilt, thick and heavy, stitched from scraps of worn denim and canvas. He laid it across the cot she had slept on the past few nights, smoothing it out with a deliberate gentleness. When he finished, he stood for a long moment, looking at the cot, then at her. She sat with her back to him, her knees drawn close, the oversized coat swallowing her frame. She looked like a child waiting for someone to tell her the night would pass safely. "You'll be warm enough," he said, not sure why he felt the need to reassure her. Perhaps because reassurance had been denied to her for too long. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting his over her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once and moved to his own place near the opposite wall, where his rifle hung overhead and his own bedroll waited. He sat on the edge of it, his body heavy with exhaustion. The fight with Clay had drained him more than he wanted to admit, not the threat of violence itself that was familiar ground but the burden of knowing someone else depended on him again. It had been years since he carried such weight, years since anyone lived beneath his roof. The fire cracked sharply, sending a plume of sparks upward. May startled at the sound, but she steadied herself quickly and drew in a slow breath. She watched the embers dance, her expression far away, as if the flames reminded her of some other stove, some other night, in a life that no longer existed. Samuel lay down fully, one arm behind his head, listening. He had learned long ago to sleep with half his senses alert, but as the wind howled and the snow lashed against the windows, his vigilance felt different. Sharper. More necessary. Because it wasn't only his life at stake. He heard May shift by the fire, then slowly timidly stand. Her soft steps moved across the floor, then paused by the cot. The quilt rustled as she pulled it back. For a moment, he expected to hear her settle in, but instead her voice broke the quiet. "Samuel." He opened his eyes but did not lift his head. Do you think they will try again, Clay, the others? He exhaled through his nose, long and slow. He had considered the same question for hours. Maybe, he admitted. Men like Clay don't forget humiliation easy. She swallowed, her breath trembling slightly. I do not want to be the reason your home is in danger. He sat up then, swinging his legs over the side of the bedroll. The fire cast shadows across his face, deepening the lines carved by years of sun and hardship. This home's been in danger from weather, wolves, drought, locusts, taxes, and men worse than Clay, he said. Danger ain't new. But having someone to share a meal with, someone to keep the stove warm when I'm out in the yard, that's new. Her eyes widened, not with fear this time but with something softer, a quiet disbelief. You are not trouble, May, he added. The trouble came long before you stepped onto this land. She stood still for a few seconds, processing the weight of those words. Then she gave a small nod, small, but steady, and lay down on the cot. The quilt muffled her movements, and soon her breathing evened out, though he could tell by the way she shifted that true sleep still eluded her. Samuel lowered himself onto his own bedroll again, his eyes drifting closed. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin the fire held firm, its glow stretching across the walls like a protective barrier. Hours passed. The storm thrashed against the windows. Snow piled high against the door. The land outside vanished into a white, swirling void. But inside, two survivors slept in the fragile shelter of warmth and flickering light. Near dawn, Samuel woke abruptly, not from a sound but from an instinct honed by years of living where danger moved as silently as snow. He sat up, listening. The storm had calmed, the wind now a low murmur. The world outside was still. Too still. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb May, and moved to the window. The glass was frosted over, but he cleared a patch with his palm. The world beyond was a vast white sheet, unbroken except for faint depressions leading toward the ridge. Tracks, human tracks, fresh. His jaw tightened. He turned toward the cot. May was awake, propped on one elbow, watching him with wide, wary eyes. What is it? She whispered. He didn't answer immediately. He didn't want to frighten her unnecessarily. But she had lived through too much deceit already. She deserved the truth, plain and unvarnished. Someone came close in the night, Samuel said. Didn't knock. Didn't call out. Just passed through. Her face went pale. Clay, she whispered. Don't know yet. He moved toward his revolver on the table and checked the cylinder out of habit. Could be hunters straying off course. Could be trappers. Could be someone from the next ranch over. Or Clay. Samuel nodded once. She pushed back the quilt and stood, her legs trembling with cold and nerves. The pink dress brushed against her shins as she crossed the room toward him. If it is him, what will you do? Samuel holstered the revolver and pulled on his coat, the same heavy sheepskin that had once saved her life. Whatever I have to. The fear in her eyes flickered like candlelight there, then swallowed by something stronger. Resolve. She stood straighter, wrapping the coat he'd given her around herself like armor. I will help, she said. He didn't smile, but something softened in him. Recognition. Respect. No, he said gently. You stay inside where it's safe. She shook her head. Out there, I was alone. In here. I am not alone. He hesitated, then sighed. Stay close. And stay low. May nodded. He moved to the door, lifted the heavy crossbar, and looked back at her once. She stood ready, chin lifted, fear trembling in her limbs but not stopping her. He opened the door. The cold slammed into them like a wall, the air sharp enough to sting their lungs. The snow had drifted high, nearly covering the porch steps, and the world was nothing but white and blue shadows. Every noise felt amplified, every movement heavy. They stepped outside together. The tracks led toward the barn. Samuel moved first, his boots crunching through the crust. May followed behind him, her steps light but determined. The morning sun crested the ridge, turning the snow into a blinding expanse of glittering ice. At the barn door, Samuel raised a hand, signaling her to stop. He pressed an ear to the wood, listening. The animals stirred softly inside, horses shifting, cows rustling, but no human sound. He pulled the door open slowly. The barn was dim, the cold seeping into the rafters. Dust motes floated in the pale light filtering through the slats. Everything appeared undisturbed, until Samuel saw the far stall. A small burlap sack hung from a nail. It hadn't been there yesterday. May stepped beside him, eyes widening. "What is that?" Samuel approached cautiously, his hand near his belt. He untied the sack and opened it. Inside were three things. A strip of dried meat. A folded scrap of paper. And a single bullet. May inhaled sharply. "Is that a threat?" Samuel unfolded the paper. The handwriting was rough, hurried. "Not Clay. You have enemies worse. Watch the ridge. A friend." He stared at the note, his jaw tightening. The bullet wasn't a threat. It was a warning. He looked at May, then at the ridgeline stretching above the homestead. "Looks like winter ain't the only thing we need to worry about," he said quietly. Samuel tucked the note into his pocket and stepped out of the barn, scanning the horizon. The snow was a blank page. Somewhere out there, someone had written the first line of a new danger. But Samuel was no longer standing alone in the cold. And that meant the story wasn't going to end the same way as before.